All right, everybody, welcome back. We are back with another deep dive, and we're talking all about FHIR today.
About FHIR, yeah.
And we came across this really interesting story about a company or a platform called Vanya. Have you ever heard of Vanya?
I have. Yeah, Vanya is interesting. They're kind of like almost like a patient portal meets a personal health record kind of situation.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense from what I saw. And they recently made a connection with Medplum's FHIR server.
Yes.
Now, I guess the importance of this story is that it shows that two different applications can be developed completely independently.
Right.
But then using this FHIR standard, they can just plug and play basically and share data back and forth.
Yep. And that's kind of the promise of FHIR, right? This idea that you can build in these Lego blocks that then anybody else who's building with Legos can then connect to.
Right.
So it really reduces a lot of the overhead of having to do custom integrations every time you want to talk to another system.
So I guess for people who maybe aren't as familiar with healthcare technology, what's maybe like a real world example of how this could benefit someone?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest pain points in healthcare is just the fragmentation of data, right? You go to one doctor, they have their system. You go to another doctor, they have their system. You go to a hospital, they have their system. And none of those systems necessarily talk to each other.
Right.
So, as a patient, you end up having to repeat your story over and over again. You have to fill out the same forms every time. And then, if you need records transferred from one place to another, it can be a real hassle.
Yeah, for sure. I've been there.
But with FHIR, the idea is that, all of those different systems could potentially be speaking the same language. You could go to a new doctor and they could just pull up your entire medical history from all of your previous providers all in one place.
Wow. Okay, that would be a game changer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No more carrying around, giant binders of medical records or having to request them and wait for them to be faxed or mailed.
Right. Yeah, like it seems like as far as like benefiting the everyday person, that's a huge plus. But what about like on a macro level?
Yeah.
What are some other ways that this could potentially benefit healthcare overall?
Yeah. So beyond just the patient experience, I think FHIR has a lot of potential to really transform healthcare research as well.
Okay, so.
Right now, a lot of medical research is limited by the fact that it's very siloed, right? You have researchers working with their own little data sets, and it's hard to combine data from different sources.
Gotcha.
But with FHIR, you could potentially have access to these massive data sets of de-identified patient data that could be used to identify trends, discover new patterns, and develop new treatments much more effectively.
Interesting. And I imagine, from a pharmaceutical company standpoint, that would also help in drug discovery.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, being able to analyze data from millions of patients could really accelerate the process of bringing new drugs and therapies to market.
So it really sounds like this FHIR thing is going to be pretty revolutionary for healthcare.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's still early days, but I think the potential is huge.
Yeah, what are some things that people should be thinking about as this technology becomes more widely adopted?
That's a good question. I think one of the biggest things is data privacy and security. Anytime you're dealing with sensitive patient information, you have to be extremely careful about how it's being handled.
Right.
So it's going to be really important to have robust security measures in place and to make sure that patients are fully informed about how their data is being used.
And I guess also having like clear regulations in place to kind of govern how this data can be used.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be crucial as well.
So really, it's not just about the technology, but also the ethics and the guidelines around it that need to be developed.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's not enough to just have the tools you have to use them responsibly.
Well, this has been a fascinating look at FHIR and all the ways it can connect, healthcare applications and all the, benefits it could have for patients and providers alike.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would just say, I think this story about Vanya and Medplum connecting is a really great example of the power of open formats. And I think we're just going to see more and more of this in the future as FHIR adoption continues to grow.
So it sounds like it's a good space to keep an eye on.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining me for another deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.